one of the advantages of being an organizer is you can give yourself a pleasant task. And it is my pleasant task to introduce Munir. So I was working on this last night and this morning, and I started putting down the usual details about his degrees, including his PhD in education from Harvard University. He pointed out to me that recently I mistakenly said it was a PhD in mathematics, but it is education. And these are some of the most salient aspects of his long career. He has been working 50 years in education. He founded the Arab Education Forum at Harvard, and he founded the Tamer Institute for Community Education. And he's a board member of Sabeel Ecumenical Liberation Theology Center. Now, at this point this morning, I suddenly remembered that someone had already written this introduction for me. The essence of Munir is questioning assumptions. And I remembered this little book, which I found one day in Shopna's study and removed to my study. So it is a Buddhist work called the Kalama Sutra, and it has 10 precepts about warning you of reasons why you should not believe things. I'm not going to go through all 10. I've selected some which are particularly appropriate to mathematics educators and academics in general. After the conference is over and the dust has cleared a little, I will put out the full set of 10 precepts on an email. So number 2, don't believe in something merely because it has become a traditional practice. People tend to imitate what others do and then pass the habit along, as in the story of the rabbit that was terrified by a fallen mango. I don't actually know the story of the rabbit and the fallen mango, but basically it's the same story as Chicken Licken, for those who know the Chicken Licken story. This is particularly appropriate for us. Don't accept and believe something just because it's written in a text. Don't believe something solely on the grounds of logical reasoning. Don't believe or accept something to be true merely because it agrees or fits with one's preconceived opinions and theories. Don't believe something just because the speaker appears believable, perhaps due to credibility or prestige. This is a comment on overlong reference sections at the end of articles. And don't believe something simply because the monk, or more broadly, any speaker, is my teacher. Nobody should be the intellectual slave of anybody else, not even of the Buddha himself. And when I talked to Munir about this earlier this morning, he said this is the most important one. So I found that I believe that that was the most appropriate way to introduce Munir, and I'm very happy, we are all very happy that you are here at MES 8.
Thank you very much, Brian. And I thank also everybody who said that they are waiting to hear from me. I hope I will not disappoint them. First, I have few things to mention. One, I'm, I think, the only one here that did not or will not use the PowerPoint. I don't know how to use it. I probably will die before I know how to use it. And I remember in 2003, there was a conference in the American University in Beirut about Arab universities. And after I spoke, a man who came from Los Alamos, he is a nuclear physicist, his comment was, "So you really want your people to stay behind?" I said, "Exactly. I don't want them to follow the steps of Los Alamos. And I want to put on my grave, he was happy to stay behind. And he was happy not to really contribute to the destruction of humanity and the human life." I want to say that I really loved this conference for the simple reason I didn't feel anyone who is here because it is a good time to really go away from work and just have a relaxed time and so on. I think everybody was serious, but seriousness in this sense to me, is the basis of happiness. Happiness is not something where you don't do anything, but you do from your heart. That is, to me, happiness. And I really thank all those who organized it, the way it was organized before, and the way it really, I saw it the past 4 or 5 days. I felt very much at home and very much, like I didn't really feel burden, I didn't feel pressure, I didn't feel any of these things. At the same time, I felt very much involved in everything that was said. Since 1971, I believed and acted with the conviction that we are lucky as human beings, that to really heal from empires, we don't need empires. We need very simple solution, very simple ways that everybody has. They don't need training, they don't need education, they don't need anything. Things that people are born with. This is, since 1971 up till now, this is the conviction that I worked with, and I will mention some of these things. Some of what I will say may sound really too much, but it's not something that I'm saying it with no history. Whatever I say that really sounds a bit far from reality, it is something that developed within me over 40-some years. The basic words that I really want to reclaim, and we really need to reclaim: wisdom, value, dignity, medium, and vision. These are words that are lost. And when we use them in a way that has nothing to do with vision, with the word. I want to start with the word vision. So I was looking at one of the most prestigious schools in America, the medical school at Harvard. And under mission and vision, this is what they have: to provide a safe, functional, and comfortable environment conducive to learning, working, and conducting research through professionalism, excellence, and teamwork. This is about the cage. They don't say anything about the spirit. It is all about the cage, which is a medical school, that it has really a free place, conducive to research. What about wellness? I thought that medicine, its main, the core of medicine is the wellness of people. Wellness is absent. And wellness is absent because it does not adhere to the basic vision or the basic values that Harvard works with, which are winning and control. All institutions are like that. It's not like Harvard is the only one. All institutions, unless they really work very, very hard, two main values are winning and control. So anything that doesn't fit winning and control, they just erase it. The other comment, very quickly, about Harvard is that its motto, as you all know probably, is veritas, which is truth. You know, when I first went there, I said, truth is not a value. Truth is a tool. We can use it to kill people, and we can use it to do well to people. Truth, I mean, yes, all the scientists in the physics, nuclear physics, they want the truth. How the nuclear energy affects people, and basically how it kills people, and kills people as cities, not as one here and one there. So the truth is not a value. And that really brings me to a very important thing about value. The way I see value is what we don't violate in action. So value, when we talk about values, it's not always a positive thing. It is what we don't violate in action. If we don't violate, like Harvard or most universities or most teachers, most curricula, if we don't violate control and winning, then control and winning are our values and not all the garbage that we really claim. I want to explain. It is actually in my paper, but let me say it here. I think it was 8th or 9th grade, I was in a class, and a best friend for many years, who is still living in Amman, Jordan. We were in the same class, and sometimes I will be the first, he will be the second, he will be the first, or I will be the second. Never really cared about it, because also our school was known among people. It is really a bad school because they don't care very much about grades. I was lucky to go to it. But anyway, what happened, one day a teacher told us, we want to see this semester who is going to be first and who is going to be second. This was the first time we hear something like this. Why? I mean, why do you want to know? What does it mean? So we felt like we have really now to compete, to really prove who is first and who is second. But we were very shy to go to the teacher and tell him, you know, why are you trying to do this to us? So we sat and we thought of something, which up till now I don't know how we thought about it. We agreed that I will write his name on my test papers, and he will write my name on his test papers. And again, I don't know how we thought about it, but here is the value of friendship. For us, our friendship was more valuable than the grades, than being first or second. And our action that we took was in line with this value. Since we value our friendship, we really, like when I wrote his name and I started answering, it's not like since I have his name, it doesn't matter what I write. No, I was writing it as if it's my paper, it's my name on it. And when one teacher recognized that, he said, "You are cheating." He said, "Yes, we prefer to cheat with our names rather than with our friendship. The friendship is our value, and not who really is one, first and second." So, I mean, all these things I will be talking about. So now, vision. One of the things that I hope on Friday, tomorrow, we will talk about is the lack of vision in the way I'm describing it for MES. It starts with aims and objectives and goals. Now, if you start with goals or aims, it's like somebody on a ship in the middle of the ocean, and they know their goal. They want to get to London. But they don't have a compass. The vision is the compass. Without a compass, without a vision, and we are stuck with goals and strategies and all of that, we don't get there. So what I will be really part of what I will try to clarify is the compass. To me, I mean, you heard me say a lot about dignity. Part of my compass is dignity, which means whatever I do, whatever I write, whatever I think, I try to not to violate this value. So if I'm saying dignity is my value, you don't listen to my words, you have to look at my actions. And my actions will either prove I'm a liar, I'm just saying one thing and doing another, or that I'm really sticking to my the value that I consider my value. So I wanted to create to stress these things because I feel they are very basic. So if all of you think that this is an important issue to discuss tomorrow about what is the vision. And to me, a vision is made of three components. That's how I developed it since 1971. One component is, what is the reality I'm living in? How do I perceive the reality I'm living in? How do I perceive my role in it, my position in it, and my role in it? And the most important part, what are the values and convictions I don't want to violate in my actions? So part of the reality that really made me believe in many of the things that I believe in. So I don't think anyone in Portland, or maybe in the US, or maybe in the world, will accept to put kerosene in his or her car. You know, kerosene is used for lighting, stoves and things like that. It's like benzene, but it is weaker. No one, although the car will move with kerosene. The reason, because they believe, and it is true, that kerosene after a while will ruin the motor, will ruin the belly of the car. While these same people don't mind at all to put what is worse in their children's stomachs. How can we explain this? We can explain it in one way. We have been made to believe that a machine is more important than a child. And all of us act it. So those who say, no, I care about my children, but go on allowing chips and Coca-Cola to be part of their daily food, then they are liars. Their value is they are valuing the machine and institutions because they are working with institutions And the institutions will not give them any promotion if they care for their children. But they will give them promotion if they care for their positions to do technically what they are asked to do without asking any question. So this is part of the reality. The other part of the reality is the two-valued logic, which is dominant in math everywhere. Everything is either A or not A. There is no third alternative. Every statement is true or false, no third alternative. We probably blamed Bush when he said, if you are not with us, you are against us. He did not create this logic. He studied it in school, like all of us. So the villain is not Bush, but math in schools. Not only math, how we in schools and universities behave. We all behave according to the logic, which is the two-valued. And yesterday, when Bob mentioned that the continued issue that stays with him is assessment, I agree. Evaluation is a very serious crime, the way we do it. Because we do it according to a vertical line, and eventually there is somebody who succeeds and somebody who fails. I mean, in Palestine, about 90,000 students sit for the general exam at the end of the 12 years. Every year, about 40% of them are declared failures and declared for life. So it will really stay with them till they die that they have failed in this general exam. I say it's amazing, and I wrote about it, but of course, I write or talk about things not because they are going to change things quickly, but we have to really keep saying what we see, even if we don't believe it's going to change anything. We really have to keep saying what we see is good and what we see is wrong. So 40% of people who are at the age of 18 are told you are failures, you are not fit to live, building that on a stupid, shallow test. I say, how come you don't have a certificate which says the person is a poet, writes poetry, or a storyteller, or a good farmer, or a good musician, or a good dancer? Why do you have only 2 certificates? Success and failure. Your imagination is stuck with these, but all of these we get mainly in school for 12 years. When I worked with women in the worst conditions of a refugee camp in Palestine, Shafat camp, it's near Jerusalem. When I first went there and I started talking with the women, you know, as usual, they say, we have a big problem here in the camp. The dropout from schools. I said, in Ramallah is considered to be much more advanced in the sense of consumerism and the number of banks we have. I said, our situation in Ramallah is worse. They drop out of life and they go to school. And they go to school and sit there for 12 years, not using their hands, not using their fingers, not using their legs, and they are deceived that this is learning. Imagine somebody sits on their behind when they are at the height of their activity. Sit, doing nothing, and we call that learning. But this is part of reality. I think those who read my paper, I said that I was a slave as a student, and I was a slave as a teacher. Because for me, the meaning of slave, somebody who follows instructions, who follows what is dictated without knowing why and without a question. We all studied in school the curriculum without really ever asking why or who put it, why this kind of math and not others. So I was slave. And I was proud of it. I was proud of it because I got all the good words. Oh, you are intelligent in math, and you are a good student, and they will give me, all kinds of praise and sometimes certificates and so on. So I was drugged, like all of us. We get drugged by these words that will prevent us from seeing reality. That I was obeying instructions without knowing why. So why are you praising me? You should tell me, you should warn me, hey, be careful. All what we gave you in school is something that we have to. And you are studying it because you have to. But please try to heal as fast as possible, whenever it's possible. They don't have that. So then, of course, as teachers, we follow instructions. We are given the textbook, and we are told to cover it. And then there will be a test at the end to make sure that you have done what you were dictated. So as teachers, we become small dictators, in addition to being slaves. Small dictators in the sense that we dictate also what our children or students do up to the university level. And then we wonder why the world is going wrong. Obviously, something goes wrong in the 12 years we sit on our behinds, doing nothing, and believing the words that we are told and all the things that we are told. The words. A nice book is by a German linguist. He talks about plastic words. Anyway, I chose at the time when I started really working with some teachers 4 words that are really darlings in academia and in institutions: education, development, planning, and strategy. Just imagine how many sentences that look meaningful but meaningless, actually, that we can form from these. Developing strategy for educational planning. Planning strategy for educational development. Strategic planning for educational development. Development education in strategic planning. Development of strategy in educational planning. Strategic development in planning for education. I mean, it goes on and on and on. What is this? This is like fast food. Words that we all buy. And not only buy, strategic planning for educational development. You say, wow, I really need at least a master's to understand what this statement means. At least. And if you want to go on, you can go on till the PhD, using and talking about rootless, lifeless, meaningless. Now, why am I saying this? Because it reminds us of algebra. X, Y, Z, W. No matter how you put them, X plus Y or X minus Z, and then, you can put them all, and we are told that this is math, and you are intelligent if you can really make sense of them. And you don't have to make sense, actually, except having the ability to do the tricks to get the right answer. So what I'm saying is we are living in a world which uses such words, and that's why slowly academic words, academic categories, and institutional words slowly became, for me, like fast food. Try to avoid them in every way possible. And I encourage always young people, I work with young people, mainly between 17 and 30. And I say, I always challenge them. Tell me about your life without using any institutional word and any academic category. It's very difficult. Try it. Try to tell about your life without using any of the academic categories and institutional words. And if you succeed to really be able to talk for 5 minutes, then you are healing. But that is my measure for healing, if you can tell about your story, about your life without. I have always a project in my mind, which is in the same book, to write my story in the form of CV, and my story without any academic category or reference. I haven't done it yet, but it is always in my mind, so that young people will really see the fallacy of the CV. Because the CV does not say anything about you. It says everything about the institutions and all the degrees that you got from institutions. You are absent. You are just a commodity that goes through this and gives value to the institutions, not to you. Okay. I have a long list of the reality, but I will stop here except for one thing. In 1978, there was a new chicken farm on the way from Ramallah, where I live, and Birzeit University. So people started really talking about the eggs there. And I really went to see. First, that was the first time I saw eggs that were not white. Actually, we call the eggs in Arabic white, because they are all white, except in modern times they are not. Anyway, when I went in every corner, there were the chicken, about 12 or so chicken in every cage, small cage, and they were eating. And the man who was like a teacher that is overseeing that every chicken does what it is supposed to do, he told me that they will keep the lights on. Actually, the idea, they got this from the Israeli chicken farms. So they borrowed that, and he said, we keep it all night so that the chicken will eat 24 hours, and they have to really give eggs every day. And if a chicken does not give eggs for 2 days or so, they will get her out of the class, you know, failed to give the right answers. But at least their answers were eggs. Our answers are just answers. And this really brings me to something very important. The language that is dominant, not only that it is garbage or really harmful, but also are words that are related to the mind and not from beginning to end, rather than to life, rather than to nature. When we say a student is first in class, what are we saying? We are using things that are totally connected to the mind, not to the mind as an active actor in life, but the mind as the king that we put on the throne about 500 years ago, and we put wisdom in jail. So the thing here is, we really have to rethink a lot of what we are doing and what we have gained and how we can heal from them. That's why, if I want to, I mean, like in the title, 2 words are very important: healing and reclaiming. probably some of you know Alan Bishop, who teaches geometry in the University of Cambridge. I met him in one of the conferences, and he told me a story which was fascinating. He said that one of the things that he is really looking for is how different cultures, different people look at space. So he met this man from Australia, the Aborigines in the middle of Australia, who were put there by force. So he went to visit him. And he thought he has a very good question for his friend. He asked him, suppose that you leave home and start walking in the desert, and you get lost. What do you do? He said, I go back home. He said, he thought that somehow he didn't understand his question. He said, I'm telling you, yeah, you leave home, but you get lost. I said, yeah, if I leave home and get lost, I go back home. So Alan Bishop says, for the first time, he realizes that the meaning of getting lost in London is totally different, or in our modern civilization, is totally different from somebody who knows the place, who knows the land, who is rooted in the place. Modern man is not rooted in any place. We don't know where we come from, and we don't know where we are going. A rooted person is somebody who knows at least from where they come from. Now, schools and universities try to really cut this connection with for knowing how to go home when we need to go home. And right now, I think, when we talk about cultures, we are talking about going home. But going home like you go back to a tree that still does not live on Monsanto, but lives on what the earth really has and the roots. So we really need to go to roots. The beauty about the roots is that they are never dead. So people who are against traditions, against roots, they are against them if they really become hard. They don't give life. They are not living. But cultures sometimes reach this point. They become hard. And then we have to not throw them because we really need our roots, but to again deal with them in a way to bring back aliveness to them. So the question here is, what are our roots? What are the basics of what I really build on? Mainly, in my opinion, is our collective memory. Collective memories cannot be looked at as something obsolete. Collective memories, as well as personal memories, are our roots, part of our roots. And we really have to build on them as much as we can. And this is exactly what happened to me when, in 1976, I was in charge of math instruction, math education in the schools of the West Bank. And I was looking for examples from life where math is really part of. So I wanted really to show that math is everywhere. And then I discovered it is impossible to really move one yard without doing a lot of math. When the child starts crawling, he is discovering space, discovering connections, discovering distances, discovering relations. When you climb a tree, you are learning a lot about math. When you climb stairs, the same. Whatever you do, there is math. Probably with the exception that when you are in a math classroom. Because then you move out of this connection with the world and you move in having connection with the mind, with words that are created by the mind for the sake of the dominance of the mind, but has nothing to do with life. So remember, the reference of words are either life or mind. And we keep stressing the words that are connected to the mind. These words that I mentioned are connected to the mind, not life. No one in one's life really needs strategies. What do you want to strategize? How you eat? Although right now we really need to strategize. But strategize to heal first. Heal from the food that is doing us harm and reclaim the food that is done by the earthworm. We have to, again, put the earthworm as one of our, not goals, but our sources of strength, our sources of living. And this earthworm is connected to the story that I want to tell about my mother, which I always tell, and I will never really cease to tell, because it has been the earthquake in my life, an intellectual earthquake. When I discovered in 1976, at the age of 35, and when I discovered that, I was at like the peak of working with math education in West Bank schools, and at the same time teaching math in 2 universities there, Bethlehem University and Birzeit University. I discovered that my mother knew math in a way that I cannot understand, I cannot do. No, not because in the mind I don't know them. Everything she did, I know it. How to cut a piece of cloth, I know. How to measure, I know better than her. All these things. What I was not able to do is to connect all my knowledge to life and to see the wholeness. I mean, for her, when a woman comes with a piece of cloth and she takes some measures, but she took the measures with a chalk. She didn't know how to write. One color for the height, one color for the waist, etc. And then at noon, there will be about 20, 30 pieces. And in the evening, it's a new hole. She moved from a hole to pieces to a hole. This is beautiful math. And she was not in the process doing any harm to anyone. At the same time, her math is connected to art. Making a dress to a woman is an art. So all these things in her, and she is labeled illiterate. She is labeled ignorant. She is labeled as she really needs empowerment. Actually, in my life, she was the one who gave me empowerment, because my story about her is what gave me any kind of meaning to my knowledge than me giving her anything. So that was, as I said, an intellectual earthquake that did not cease. And my family happens to be a Christian, Palestinian, Arab family. So for her, she has been Christian through her family since probably Christ walked on the land of Palestine. Her Christianity, if you tell her what did Christ say, she only remembers one thing. She knows one thing: love one another. That's all what she knew about Christ. But that was enough, in my opinion, to really make her a much more true Christian than most of those who came with PhDs in divinity as missionaries to tell us about Christ. It is again, part of the problem. I mean, imagine I go to China to preach Confucius. It will be, I mean, unthinkable. But for Europeans and Americans, they do it all the time. They go to Palestine, they come to Palestine to tell us about Jesus. The Jesus I know is a political figure. Because for him, his disciples, the first 4 disciples he chose, were fishermen in Tiberias Lake. Fishermen in Tiberias up till now, but then they were the lowest of the economic, social strata. When he chose them as his first disciples, that was a political choice. He, like Bob said, he was on the side, on their side. He didn't really seek people like Paul, who became a saint afterwards. And Paul wanted to convert Rome. Jesus did not want to convert Rome. He said, what belongs to Rome, give it to Rome, and what belongs to people, give it to people. Or actually, he put it God, because for him, so for me, I mean, Jesus is a Palestinian figure. Everything he said, everything he did was connected to Palestine. That is not a chauvinist way. What I'm talking about is he was connected to place. Even Jesus, who is thought by Christians to be the Son of God, was connected to a place much more than any one of us in the modern time is connected to the place he lives in. So this connection is very important. If math is not connected to the place, it does not spring from the place, to hell with it. Our intentions are good. But like Ivan Illich says, to hell with good intentions. So what we really need to do is to get out of the drug that, frankly, I say it is called education. How many of you know the history of the development of education as we know it now? Maybe very few. Why? Because the story tells the truth. I encourage you to really look for the story, how this destructive idea, I say destructive because it is fundamentalist. And to really make myself clear, I'm not against education, schools, universities for those who want to go there. I have no right to tell them not to. But what I say, what I'm against, and against very much, is the monopoly of education and academia over what knowledge is and what learning is. We really need to stop this fundamentalist institution from going further in ruining life. It is not politics and religion that started fundamentalism. Of course, there was fundamentalism in them that was practiced by people. But no fundamentalism succeeded like education. It is now all over. If somebody gets a degree in the university that I taught in Palestine, in Berzeit, if he gets or she gets a degree from there, they can apply to any university in the world. Which means knowledge is so shallow. Because if it is rooted, then you cannot take that knowledge of the rooted, that is rooted in your place, in your life, to really put it somewhere else. The Friends, I consider the Friends group, the Quakers, to be probably one of the most honest, have integrity, etc. They built their first school in 1889 in Ramallah. And they came with the idea of civilizing us. One of their T-shirts, even now, says, Palestinian education since 1889. Not American education in Palestine, since. But Palestinian, they really believed that what is good in Philadelphia is good in Ramallah. This idea of universal has to stop. And if you really want to transfer to another university, not because of your grades and the knowledge, but actually because you think that by being there, you will enrich your understanding of what you are doing home. Not to compete there so that you will prove you're really up You are up to their level. Anyway, all of these are issues that are very serious. I don't know how much time I have. 10 minutes? Okay. All right. Now, as I said, what Ellen Bishop says about this man in the Aborigine land happened to me when I really got lost in math and math education and all what I have read and all what I've done. And I didn't know really where to go. I was lucky because my mother was at home. So I didn't really have to go back home in the sense of physically, but I had to go back home mentally and perceptually. And she was the source, not only of my knowledge in math, but my knowledge in general. She was my source of, she was the one who reminded me that the Palestinian Jesus is different from the Jesus that was imported later. And in this, I want to use also math as something that connects different phenomena. I want to tell you the similarity that I see between sugar, between math, and between Jesus. Sugar is the easiest for you to understand. Sugar is in fruit and other things, naturally. But this, it was extracted and changed into pure sugar. And pure sugar can enter everywhere in the world and ruin the bodies of children, mainly. The math, as I said, is in everything we do, there is math. When it was abstracted in a bad sense, because abstraction is always one of the best things that human beings can do. What I'm doing now is abstracting between these three phenomena. So it was taken out of living, out of life, and it became pure math. Notice, we use the same word even. Pure math, pure sugar. Jesus was the same. Europe took what they wanted from Jesus and brought Jesus back to us and to the world as pure Jesus. He is not now connected to a land. He is not connected to life. He is not on the side of the poor. He was on the side of the poor, not in a pitiful way. The Sermon on the Mount is not a sermon, is a manifesto of dignity. He was telling them, you are blessed. He was telling them, you are marginalized, like we use now. You are blessed to be marginalized, in a way. Not to be part of the Roman Empire. Not to be part of the Roman structure in Palestine. That you are still doing hunting and making clothes and making food and planting and all these, raising children. So that is going back to my roots through collective memory. My memory of my mother is a very basic element in my life, in the build-up of my knowledge. And when I put the references in my thesis, the first time, I put my mother as first reference. The second reference, but I didn't tell the story of the hens, the Palestinian hen, but my second reference was the Palestinian hen. The third reference was the earthworm. I dropped the earthworm before because I knew it will be too much for them to accept. But I kept the Palestinian hen and my mother, and there was a big fight and ridiculing and all of that. But I insisted, and I didn't write anything for a whole year. Then we got an agreement. I dropped the Palestinian hen, and I keep my mother. And I kept my mother. But then I wrote about my mother and the Palestinian hen in the article that I sent to Brian that he sent to you yesterday. just some pages from that article. And it was again published in the Harvard Education Review. And many groups in America stopped the subscription after I wrote it, because this is what they told me at the review, especially Jewish Zionist groups, that they thought I'm belittling the Israeli hen. Because basically I said my knowledge was like the Israeli hen, eats all night and day. There's homework and at night also. While my mother was like the Palestinian hen, who was able to survive anywhere, everywhere, all the time. In 1967, after the war between Israel and the Arab countries, I was working in Birzeit University. The president told us, we don't know when we are going to, whether we will be open or not. So I leave you free to, if you find other jobs. I couldn't find a job. Who wants outside the classroom to learn about quadratic equations or about calculus? I mean, if I go to the market and tell them I have calculus to sell, they probably will put me in jail or in some kind of reform institute to become again sane. The funny thing is that my mother didn't stop. When we were expelled from Jerusalem in 1948, the only person who was able to work and continue working and support the family, provide for the family, was my mother. Because she did not have a degree. Because she did not need an institution. She did not need any of the things that we now think we cannot really live without. In 1967, I was amazed. I mean, I can't do anything. I can't plant. I can't raise animals. I can't cook. I can't. I can't sing. I can't tell. I'm not a storyteller to really make money out of that. So, I mean, it was, as I said, the first shock, but not the first earthquake. The first earthquake was when, 10 years later, I discovered that my mother knows math in a way that I cannot understand and cannot do. And it took me actually several years before I was able to say it like I'm saying it now. What am I mean, I was at the peak of my career to go and tell people that I don't understand the math that my mother knows and she is illiterate. Where am I going to put myself in that admittance? Okay. So I didn't do anything. Now, since I have only 2 minutes, which I can extend to maybe 3 or 4, I just want to say one thing. What are we going to reclaim? Over the years, since 1971, one of the main things that I reclaimed is to use mujawara, in Arabic we call it mujawara, I'll explain quickly, as the medium of learning. And mujawara basically is a group of people, regardless of their age, of whatever, that really want to learn about something, that they will meet and learn about it. And everything else will be resources. They are not to decide what the group really wants to learn. And this really happened, as I said, since 1971. The first time I really worked with it, without even calling it mujawara. It was like a matter of what was dictated to me, dictated now in a nice sense, by the situation in Palestine. And I did it first with what I called voluntary work, where we just go to villages, refugee camps, and so on, and work. Then I used it in the classrooms, in schools, by telling students, whoever wants to really form a science and math club, just come on Thursday. No teachers, nothing, just for you to sit, and everyone starts with a question that he or she has. Because science does not start with theories, it starts with a question that the person has. And it really succeeded so well that the military government of the West Bank had to call me and had to really send to all schools, it is not allowed to have science and math clubs in schools without getting personal permission from him. So when he called me and I went, he said, this is political. I said, this is math, and we are talking about math and science. He said, you know what I mean. And of course, I know what he means. So I didn't really argue more. Anyway, so Mujawara as a medium is a beautiful way of learning that has been lost, especially in modern societies. It is still very viable, very very much practiced in other. So in that sense, we are better prepared for the future. The other thing that I really wanted to say, but maybe I will not say it now because it takes time, is that was for me the second intellectual earthquake, in relation to evaluation. Like Bob, I was really wondered, what am I going to do with this? Since 1971 till 1997, when I read a book that was written 1,200 years ago in Arabic. Luckily, we can read something written that far and still understand it. And I saw a statement by Imam Ali. And the statement says, the worth of a person, I'm translating now, the worth of a person is what he or she yuhsin. Now, the word yuhsin in Arabic has several meanings. One of them is what you do well. The second, what you do is beautiful. The third, all these are the meanings in that word. The third is what you do is useful. Useful not for you to get a job, but also for the community. And what is really comes from you. Not you take a course in Oxford and you teach it in Palestine as it is. That's not what you do. That's not your worth. It has to really develop after a lot of reflection and articulation. And the fourth is when you argue with respect. A storyteller, usually, a good storyteller, has these five. So that is his worth or her worth. A teacher, at best, we are asked to do technically what is good. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be useful. It doesn't have to be giving. It doesn't have to be respectful. Thank you very much.
So I need to unmute this, yeah? I need to turn it on? And I need to escape it? That's not what I have. Ah, okay, good. My name is Julia Aguirre, and I'm from the University of Washington, Tacoma. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to respond. I was actually unsure how I was going to do this. We have many differences. Generational, gender, nationality, culturally, linguistically. I was a child when Munir Fashe was a mathematics teacher. I did not grow up under violent occupation. Nor do my children live under such a daily threat. Yet as I was reading, I was remembering my father, a Chicano activist. And for those of you who are not from the US, a Chicano is someone who identifies usually of Mexican descent with a political social justice agenda. And he was an activist here in the Northwest. And he was describing to me as a child the Palestinian struggle for freedom and justice. And I listened to these stories about solidarity in the struggle against ending injustice and systematic oppression. And the connections between the Chicano movement and the Palestinian movement were a part of my history growing up. I remember my father sent me off to the university. He took me out to lunch. And he said to me, "Remember who you are and where you come from." So as a scholar and activist, mathematics educator, mother of mixed heritage, and who is often marginalized in the academy based on institutional racism and sexism, I also believe we share many tensions in the healing spaces about the role mathematics plays and does not play in the struggle toward a more just and peaceful world. So your paper provided new insights and opportunities for me to grow as a person and a mathematics educator. To think about our tensions and healings and histories of why we do this work and the way we do this work. I would like to invite us to have a dialogue. In your paper you described, and you just started to tell us at the very end, what a mujarrara is. And for those of you who may not have read his paper, the mujarrara refers to any group of people who freely decide to meet regularly and start from an existential situation where they happen to be, with no internal or external authority, in their quest to learn, understand, and to act. A basic aspect of mujarrara is both personal and communal freedom to learn and act in harmony with well-being and wisdom. So I have a few questions or perhaps tensions that I would like to talk with you about. So I'm wondering if you will join me. I have to have this. Okay. So you make connections among mathematical knowledge, domination, freedom, and intelligence. In your paper, you describe words that embody inequality are crucial in domination, especially inequality in intelligence. And this makes me think of an idea talked about by Paulo Freire, that our knowledge is invented and reinvented through struggle. This inquiry into the world and with each other leads to being more fully human. And to prevent another person from engaging in such inquiry is a form of violence or a dehumanizing action. And so I wanted to know if you could talk a little bit more about the interconnectedness in relation to mathematics of these ideas.
First, I know Paulo Freire very well and personally. And actually, I invited him to come to Palestine. But when we decided that he will come, his wife died, and he couldn't. And later, his health was not helping him, so he never made it to Palestine. I love this man, and I know, again, a lot, and agree a lot with many of the things that he does. But again, the idea of interconnectedness or relation, what I really did not like about Freire's approach is he divided people into levels of consciousness. You know, there is the more, those who are more conscious and are less, and then less and less. And the ones who are more have to really teach the ones who are less. Here, he is following the logic of education. But he is deciding who is up. I mean, he changed not the logic, but he changed the fact that he is now calling them more conscious rather than more educated. So for me, it is really strange that he didn't see that dividing people, and somebody like expert or those who are trained, somebody like Freire or those who trained in the Freirean way, are allowed to really put people to decide who is more conscious than who is not, rather than to look at every person as I said to some in one group, I heard this in India, the first time I visited India, every person is uniquely complete. So every person is a completely, like a seed of a plant. I cannot compare. Every seed has the potential to really grow, and all what we can do is provide that seed with the right environment and not use any chemicals, not use anything that really will ruin its ability to develop healthily. So for me, he couldn't connect, it seems, that the logic he is using is the same logic that I personally am against, and mainly in mathematics, and the logic that is propagated by math, where people can always be put on a vertical line. People cannot be. And that's why, to me, the worst inequality, that is the source of all inequalities, is believing that people are not equal in intelligence and giving yourself the right to tell who is more intelligent than another. Arrogance beyond belief. But we practice it. And at one time, I practiced it before I healed. After I met my mother in a new, with new eyes. So I don't know whether there is still something else that I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think, so we can go on. And I think I want to talk more with you about that. So, okay. So in your paper, you discussed that your attempts to connect your university and school learning mathematics and your mother's mathematics would have been a change that was an act of violence. And you elected to preserve the situation and not make that connection. And you state, in this sense, anyone who gets knowledge via universities or training programs in order to change society is acting violently. Okay. So I really struggled with this statement. It made me really nervous about, because sometimes universities contain information needed to inform change. They cultivate counter-narratives and are sites for struggle and movement, intellectual movements, civil rights struggles that challenge the dominant discourse, both in and out of mathematics. Yet I have to ask, where do these counter-narratives come from? And the experience and actions and the struggles and the learning around justice can occur within institutions. So there's two examples that I'll give you. One is reading and being engaged or introduced to ideas around Paulo Freire's work was transformative for me. It helped me put a language and to name certain things that I was experiencing when I was teaching that I couldn't do. And trying to understand inequality in education and inequality in serving young people in the community, it helped give names to that. And that I would not have been introduced to in any places except the university. The second example has to do with my work as a mathematics teacher educator. So it is through the university and work within institutions that I hope to create counter-narratives that shatter the myths that you were talking about in your paper. And that facilitate a different set of teaching practices that actually work to make the connection that you decided not to make. To connect and value the funds of knowledge that families, children bring, and to use that as a way to engage and learn new mathematics. So part of me feels in some ways my role is to help create a counter-narrative. And, I agree with the plants, we need plants, we plant our plants, but even the soil that we plant our plants in, not all the soil is the same. And there are structures that affect the growing of the plant. And so my role as a math teacher educator in a university, I feel is sometimes, is a place where I can open up conversations around counter-narratives against the dominant discourse of the children and families that I represent, and that are part of the communities that I work in and live in, and that are often underserved in schools. So I feel that the university or my place there is a place to disrupt and transform. And so I was trying to make sense of and wondered about this idea of trying to make that connection and how that might be, who am I being violent against, right? Because I feel like if I don't do that, then many of the white teachers that I work with, their privilege and power remain unchanged. Nothing gets disrupted. And so I'm trying to understand a little bit more about that, because I certainly don't want to be engaged in violence. And yet sometimes I feel that I'm trying to open up a space to have a counter-narrative. Does that make sense?
For me, violence is disrupting the natural growth of humans, plants, animals, communities. All these were done without experts. They were done without budgets. They were done with no professional or how to do books. It was done by biological abilities. Imagine if we are taught how to digest food. Probably we will not survive for more than a few days. Because when we start really thinking about it, and I'm going to get this food here and there and so on, imagine if we really decide how to tell a body how to heal. It doesn't work. There are biological abilities. Healing, for me, is a biological ability. Sometimes it needs something from outside. That's fine. But not as a substitute from the very beginning. Same thing with knowing, learning, making sense, understanding. It is a biological ability. Universities, schools, and the whole idea of institutionalizing learning actually is a violent act against the biological ability. So if you add to the biological ability, fine. If you replace it, then it is a violent act. And the example, I think I have it in the paper, I'm not sure. Palestinian peasants, and maybe others, but at least in Palestine, when they want really to plant fruit, they start with bitter almonds. They plant bitter almond trees. The reason they start with bitter almond, because the bitter almond is repellent to insects that can really grow through them and ruin the tree. After they do that, then they what's the word, graft, or what's the word for graft? Graft other fruit. This way, at least they are sure the internal resistance is high. They don't kill it by chemicals. They just make the internal resistance high. I think this is what children and what people need. Not to disrupt this inner strength, this inner immunity. Because we all have immunity, except the mind, actually. It needs wisdom to be immune. It cannot do it by itself. So what I'm saying is that after, I mean, by schools going, by children going to schools, very early age, and wiping out their collective memory, their personal memory, their stories, whatever they have learned so far, and start building on a curriculum, to me, this is a violent act because it does not respect the normal biological way of growth, which is in every human being and in every social gathering. So this is my first reaction to that. The beauty about the bitter almond is after you have that stem, then you can go wild in what you really graft on that stem. The same thing, after you are sure that the inner strength, and which part of the inner strength, by the way, is dignity. When we start with the school and say, now we are going to teach you to become really good citizens, and you become educated, and you become civilized, and all of that, we are attacking dignity. When you respect the biological ability to learn and build on that, then you are not violating the dignity. The same thing, I think, with food. I mean, to really give the food that we give to children right now is a violent act against the body. It's a very violent act. When they really, instead of water, they drink cola or any other sparkling sweet drink. It is a violent act. But we don't look at it this way. Why? Why don't we look at it this way? And then if somebody slaps the cheek of his son, it is violent. Actually, that will probably make him deal in different ways with his father, learn how to trick his father sometimes. But it's not as harmful as saying, you are less intelligent, so there is no hope. And it is not my opinion. I have a test that was invented by a French and was elaborated on by Stanford and by so they give me all the history of institutions that really created this crime. To me, measuring intelligence and telling children you are not intelligent as the other is a violent act. But we all believe it, and we all act it, and we all practice it. So the question here is how can higher education become lower? It puts its feet again on the ground and really start with what nature has. Biological abilities is part of our strengths as human beings and as communities. Anything to be added without violating that, I'm not against it. But to really say, oh, this community is marginalized, I want to go and save it. To me, that is the wrong starting point. You can help maybe later by being there for a while, understanding what's going on, understanding their strengths. When I worked with these women in the refugee camp, of course, when I went there, everything is awful. On the surface, everything is awful. But when I worked with the mothers, wow, I found treasures. Really, treasures. I said, without you, the Palestinian problem would have been solved a long time ago against us. You are keeping our dignity and our ability to go on. By the way, I mean, there are usually 8 to 10 people in one room living, and everything is bad. How can she keep hope and love in that environment? 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days. She never has a rest. Of course, it is unfair to her. But it is like the earthworm. It goes on making life, nurturing.
Oh, we have one more. Can we do one more? Okay. One more. So the last one is about planting seeds. So you said it was very hard for teachers to accept my saying, there is no child who is illogical. Schools plant seeds of inequality and powerlessness in children's minds. Given what you know now and the work that you do, can schools also help to plant different seeds of equity and empowerment, justice in children's minds? How does that tie into the concept of Yuhasan? How does that tie into the concept of Yuhasan? Yusin, sorry.
First, the role of universities, schools, parents is not to plant seeds, but actually to water the seeds that are already there. Every child has his or her own seeds. What we really need is to water it. What is interesting actually about the Arabic language, we use the same word for watering plants and for telling stories. Because the stories water our souls and our imagination and our understanding. We use the same word, yarwi. Yarwi means telling a story. Yarwi means watering a plant. The same word, exactly the same word. But that is, again, the beauty of the Arabic culture, the Arabic language. It has a lot of, and I say we shouldn't really teach math without Arabic at the same time. Because Arabic is very unique in the sense that, first, it's really survived a long time and with a lot of new meanings, etc. But also it has patterns. And it has connections. As I said, the word yuhsin has 5 meanings, at least. I mean, these are the 5 meanings that I could find or think of. So there is richness. There is wisdom there. Now, with yuhsin, it means what a person does well, beautiful, useful, giving, and respectful. Imagine we do this with children. We don't need then to measure their evaluation in any other way by numbers. We don't need to measure or doubt their intelligence. Because everybody, with the seed that they have, we let this seed grow and see where we need to water what that person does with passion, with love, and with caring, and nurture it. So our role is to nurture what is there, rather than to plant.